Welcome back to the Genius Circle community and our transformative exploration of the inner critic. I'm Dr. Bren, and we've been building a comprehensive understanding of this powerful internal voice that shapes so much of our lived experience. Over our first 4 parts, we've explored the foundational worldview, differences between materialist and spiritual approaches, discovered how the critic forms through developmental stages and defense mechanisms, examined how trauma and culture amplify its intensity, and identified how your Enneagram type creates specific critic patterns. Today, in Part 5, we're addressing one of the most crucial distinctions for anyone on a path of conscious development. How do you tell the difference between the destructive voice of the inner critic and the genuinely helpful guidance of a healthy conscience? This isn't just an academic question. Many people, in their attempts to silence their inner critic, accidentally throw away valuable internal guidance. Others mistake the critic's harsh attacks for legitimate moral guidance and continue to abuse themselves in the name of growth. Learning this discernment is essential because the goal isn't to eliminate all internal evaluation. It's to transform destructive criticism into wise guidance. Today we'll explore exactly how to make this crucial distinction and begin cultivating the kind of internal voice that actually serves your highest development. So let's dive into understanding the difference between criticism and conscience and how to nurture the voice of authentic wisdom within. Understanding the core difference. The inner critic and healthy conscience may seem similar because both involve internal evaluation, but they operate from fundamentally different sources and serve completely different purposes. The inner critic emerges from wounded, defensive parts of the psyche, operates from fear, shame, and survival-based thinking, seeks to control through punishment and threat, focuses on what's wrong and inadequate, offers no genuine path to improvement, speaks with urgency, harshness, and contempt. Healthy conscience emerges from the integrated, wise self, operates from love, values, and growth-oriented thinking, guides through clarity and truth, acknowledges both strengths and growth areas, provides concrete steps for positive change, speaks with calm firmness and respect. Internal family systems provides a powerful lens for understanding this distinction. In IFS terms, the inner critic is typically a manager part, a type of protector that tries to control our experience to prevent vulnerability and pain. The inner critic, as manager protector, developed early to manage how we're perceived by others, uses preemptive self-attack to avoid external criticism, believes that harsh internal control prevents external harm, operates from the assumption, if I criticize myself first, I won't be rejected, carries the burden of trying to make us acceptable to others, works tirelessly, but often creates the very problems it's trying to prevent self-energy as source of healthy conscience. The self in IFS is the core essence that exists beyond all parts. Naturally contains the 8 C's: curiosity, compassion, courage, creativity, calm, connectedness, clarity, and confidence. Doesn't need to protect because it knows its inherent worth, can hold all parts of our experience with love and wisdom, provides guidance that serves the whole system, not just protection strategies, operates from abundance rather than scarcity. When you hear internal guidance, ask, is this coming from a manager part? Does it feel urgent and controlling? Is it trying to prevent something bad from happening? Does it sound like it's carrying a heavy burden? Is there an underlying fear of rejection or inadequacy? Is this coming from self-energy? Does it feel spacious and clear? Is it naturally compassionate and curious? Does it hold the whole situation with wisdom? Is there a sense of unshakable worth underneath? The goal isn't to eliminate manager parts, but to help them relax their extreme roles so self-energy can lead with its natural wisdom. The source makes all the difference. This distinction isn't just about tone or content, it's about the fundamental source of the guidance. The critic emerges from traumatized, defensive aspects of our psyche that develop to manage threat and maintain survival. Healthy conscience emerges from our deepest wisdom and authentic values. Understanding this source difference helps explain why the critic's guidance, even when it identifies real issues, rarely leads to sustainable positive change. It's coming from a wounded place and therefore can only offer wounded solutions. How the critic operates. To develop discernment, it's essential to recognize the critic's characteristic patterns. Language and tone. Uses absolutist language. Always, never, completely, totally employs harsh, contemptuous, or sarcastic tones. Makes global character attacks rather than specific behavioral observations. Uses words like should, must, have to, with urgency and pressure, focus and content. Obsesses over what's wrong, missing, or inadequate. Compares constantly to others or impossible standards. Rehashes past mistakes without offering learning or growth. Focuses on problems without providing workable solutions. Attacks identity and worth rather than addressing behaviors. Emotional impact. Creates feelings of shame, hopelessness, or rage. Generates anxiety, panic, or depression. Leaves you feeling smaller, weaker, or more isolated. Triggers fight, flight, freeze. Responses in the nervous system. Results in paralysis or compulsive, reactive behaviors. Timing and context. Attacks when you're already vulnerable or struggling. Intensifies during times of transition or growth. Becomes loudest when you're considering positive changes. Activates strongly after mistakes or perceived failures. Often contradicts itself or moves goalposts. The critic's false solutions. When the critic does offer solutions, they typically fall into these categories. Perfectionism. If you just do it perfectly, you'll be safe. People-pleasing. If you make everyone happy, you'll be loved. Achievement. If you accomplish enough, you'll be valuable. Control. If you control everything, nothing bad will happen. Withdrawal. If you don't try, you can't fail. These solutions all share the characteristic of being external, fear-based, and ultimately unsustainable because they don't address the underlying wounds driving the criticism. How authentic guidance operates. Healthy conscience has distinctly different characteristics. Language and tone uses specific, nuanced language that acknowledges complexity. Speaks with firmness but without contempt or attack. Makes behavioral observations rather than character judgments. Offers guidance as invitation rather than demand. Focus and content. Acknowledges both strengths and areas for growth. Provides specific, actionable steps for improvement. Considers the whole person and situation, not just problems. Offers learning opportunities from mistakes and challenges. Focuses on values and meaning rather than external validation. Emotional impact. Generates feelings of clarity, strength, and possibility. Creates motivation through inspiration rather than fear. Leaves you feeling more integrated and capable. Supports nervous system, regulation, and calm presence. Results in thoughtful, values-based action. Timing and context. Offers guidance when you're receptive and able to hear it. Provides support during difficult times rather than attack. Encourages growth and positive change with patience. Responds to mistakes with learning opportunities. Remains consistent in its core messages over time. When healthy conscience offers guidance, It tends toward integration. How can you honor all parts of this situation? Values alignment. What action would reflect your deepest values? Growth orientation. What is this experience trying to teach you? Wholeness. How can you respond from your most integrated self? Service. How can this serve something larger than your ego? These solutions are internally generated, growth-based, and sustainable because they emerge from wisdom rather than wound. Values versus rules. One of the clearest ways to distinguish between critic and conscience is understanding the difference between values-based guidance and rule-based criticism. The critic operates through rules, rigid, inflexible standards that don't account for context, should statements that feel imposed from outside binary thinking: right, wrong, good, bad, success, failure. Rules often inherited from family, culture, or trauma. Punishment-based enforcement. If you break the rule, you're bad. Healthy conscience operates through values, flexible principles that can be applied wisely to different situations. Internal compass that feels authentic and personally meaningful. Nuanced thinking that can hold complexity and paradox. Values chosen consciously based on what truly matters to you. Growth-based guidance. How can you live these values more fully? Clarifying your authentic values. Many people struggle with this distinction because they've never clearly identified their authentic values apart from inherited rules. Consider these questions. What qualities do you most admire in others? When have you felt most alive and authentic? What would you stand for even if it was difficult? What legacy do you want to leave in the world? What principles guide you when no one is watching? Authentic values feel energizing and meaningful, even when they're challenging to live. Rules feel imposed and draining, even when they're easy to follow. Wisdom, traditions, and inner guidance. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have distinguished between ego-based judgment and authentic spiritual guidance. Christian contemplative tradition distinguishes between the false self that judges and the true self that loves, recognizes discernment as a spiritual gift different from judgment, emphasizes conscience formed by love rather than law. Buddhist understanding differentiates between discriminating wisdom and judgmental mind, sees right speech and right action as emerging from compassion, not criticism, recognizes the mind's tendency to create suffering through harsh judgment. Hindu yogic perspective distinguishes between ego mind, ahamkara, and higher wisdom, buddhi, recognizes dharma as authentic, right action based on truth rather than rules, sees spiritual guidance as emerging from connection to divine consciousness. Indigenous wisdom often emphasizes guidance from nature, ancestors, and spirit rather than mental concepts, recognizes the importance of community discernment alongside individual guidance, values harmony and balance over perfectionism or individual achievement. Contemplative practices for developing discernment. Traditional practices that support the development of healthy conscience include meditation, creating space to hear subtle guidance beneath mental noise, prayer, connecting with guidance beyond the personal ego, contemplative reading, engaging wisdom, texts for insight rather than rules, spiritual direction, receiving support for discerning authentic guidance, silent retreat, extended periods of listening for deeper wisdom, different brain networks for criticism versus wisdom. Neuroscience reveals that criticism and wisdom actually activate different brain networks. The critic activates default mode network associated with rumination and self-referential worry, threat detection system, amygdala and related structures scanning for danger, executive control network, prefrontal, cortex trying to manage and control stress response system, releasing cortisol and other stress hormones. Healthy conscience activates compassion, network, including areas associated with caregiving and kindness. Wisdom, network, integrating emotion, memory, and higher reasoning. Present moment awareness, networks associated with mindfulness and presence. Calming system, parasympathetic nervous system, promoting rest and reflection. Practices that support wise. Discernment. Understanding these neural patterns suggests specific practices that can strengthen healthy conscience. Mindfulness and presence. Regular meditation to strengthen present moment awareness. Body awareness practices to access somatic wisdom. Breathing exercises to activate the calming system. Self-compassion. Loving kindness meditation to strengthen compassion networks. Self-compassion breaks during difficult moments. Treating yourself as you would a beloved friend. Values clarification. Regular reflection on what truly matters to you. Journaling about meaningful experiences and insights. Vision work connecting to your deepest purpose. Nervous system. Regulation. Practices that support parasympathetic activation. Time in nature to reset stress response systems. Adequate rest and restoration to maintain clarity. Real-time discernment practice. When you notice internal guidance arising, you can use these questions to assess its source. Quality check. Questions tone. Is this voice speaking with kindness or harshness? Content. Is it offering specific, helpful guidance or vague criticism? Timing. Is it offering support when I need it or attacking when I'm vulnerable? Impact. Does this guidance energize me or drain me? Source. Does this feel like it's coming from wisdom or from wound? The stop practice. Stop and pause when you notice internal guidance. Take a breath and center yourself. Observe the quality and source of the voice. Proceed based on what serves your highest good. The veils filter. Exercise. Before acting on internal guidance, run it through your values filter. Identify the guidance. What is this voice suggesting I do or believe? Check alignment. Does this align with my authentic values? Consider impact. Would following this guidance move me toward or away from who I want to be? Assess sustainability. Is this guidance something I could follow with integrity over time? Feel into resonance. Does this feel true and right in my body and heart? The two voices, dialogue from IFS perspective. When facing a decision or challenge, explicitly dialogue with both voices from an IFS framework. Ask the manager critic. Part. What are you worried about? What are you trying to protect me from? How long have you been carrying this burden? Listen with compassion to its concerns while recognizing it as one part, not your whole self. Ask from self-energy. What does my self know about this situation? What would love and wisdom guide me to do here? Drop into the spacious awareness that naturally contains curiosity, compassion, and clarity. Integration from self. How can I appreciate this manager part's protective intention while leading from self-energy? Let self-energy hold both the part's concerns and the wise path forward. Why this work can be difficult. Several factors make developing discernment challenging. The critic's convincing voice. It often sounds urgent and important. It uses familiar language from childhood authorities. It promises safety through control and perfection. It can disguise itself as helpful guidance. Cultural conditioning. Many cultures reward harsh self-criticism as motivation. Spiritual traditions can be misinterpreted to support self-attack. Achievement-oriented societies often conflate criticism with standards. Trauma responses. Past experiences may have taught you that harsh voices keep you safe. Gentleness may feel dangerous if it was associated with vulnerability. The nervous system may be wired to trust familiar, critical patterns. Fear of becoming soft. Worry that without harsh criticism, you'll become lazy or complacent. Concern that self-compassion means lowering standards. Fear that you need the critic's motivation to achieve goals. Working with these challenges. Start small. Begin with low-stakes situations to practice discernment before applying it to major life decisions. Notice the results. Pay attention to which type of guidance actually leads to positive change and which keeps you stuck. Seek support, work with therapists, spiritual directors, or wise friends who can help you recognize healthy guidance. Practice patience. Developing discernment is a skill that takes time, especially if you've lived with a harsh critic for years. Trust the process. Notice that as you follow authentic guidance, your life generally moves in more positive directions. From critic to conscience. The beautiful truth is that the inner critic can actually transform into healthy conscience through conscious work. This isn't about eliminating the critic, but about updating its methods and source. Phase 1. Recognition. Learning to identify the critic's voice and patterns. Distinguishing criticism from genuine guidance. Understanding the critic's protective intentions. Phase 2. Dialogue. Engaging with the critic as a part, rather than identifying with it. Asking what it's trying to protect and how it learned these strategies. Offering appreciation for its intentions while questioning its methods. Phase 3. Values. Clarification. Identifying your authentic values beyond inherited rules. Connecting with what truly matters to you at the deepest level. Using values as a compass for decision making. Phase 4. Embodied practice. Learning to feel the difference between criticism and wisdom in your body. Developing nervous system regulation skills to access wise states. Practicing self-compassion as a foundation for clear discernment. Phase 5. Integration. The critic's protective concerns become integrated into wise decision-making standards remain high, but are held with compassion rather than attack. Motivation comes from inspiration and values rather than fear and shame. Signs of healthy transformation. You'll know this work is progressing when your internal voice becomes kinder but no less truthful. You can receive feedback without devastating self-attack. You make decisions based on values rather than fear. Your standards remain high but feel sustainable. You experience more energy and creativity. Relationships improve as you become less defensive. You can acknowledge mistakes without identity collapse. In our next installment, we'll explore the somatic dimensions of inner critic work, how criticism lives in the body, and how embodied practices can support transformation. We'll discover where and how the inner critic manifests physically in your body, somatic exercises for releasing critical energy and tension, how to use breath and movement to shift from critical to compassionate states, embodied practices for cultivating self-compassion, the role of nervous system regulation in critic transformation, why working with the body is essential for lasting change. We'll also begin exploring specific transformation practices that integrate everything we've learned so far. This will prepare us for the final parts of our series focusing on practical transformation approaches and long-term integration. Exhaustion. Cultivating your inner wisdom. As we close this exploration of critic versus conscience, I invite you to begin experimenting with this discernment in your daily life. This week's practice. Morning check-in. Each morning, ask your wise self, what guidance do you have for me today? Notice the quality of what arises. Critic awareness. When you notice critical thoughts, pause and ask, is this coming from wound or wisdom? Values. Reflection. Identify one core value that's important to you and practice making decisions from that value rather than from fear or shoulds. Evening review. Before sleep, reflect. When did I follow criticism today? And when did I follow conscience? What were the different results? Reflection. Questions. What does your healthy conscience sound like when you're quiet enough to hear it? Which of your internal rules might actually be inherited criticism rather than authentic values? How does your body feel different when you're listening to criticism versus wisdom? What would change in your life if you trusted your wise guidance more consistently? Building your discernment. Muscle. Remember that developing this discernment is like building any other skill. It requires practice, patience, and self-compassion when you make mistakes. The goal isn't perfection, but rather growing capacity to distinguish between voices that harm and voices that heal. Thank you for joining me in this crucial exploration of distinguishing between the inner critic and healthy conscience. This discernment forms the foundation for all effective inner critic work. Without it, we risk either staying trapped in criticism or throwing away valuable internal guidance. For our Genius Circle community, mastering this discernment is essential for conscious development. When you can reliably distinguish between the voice of wound and the voice of wisdom, you have an internal compass that can guide you through any challenge life presents. Remember that your wise self has been with you all along. It may have been quiet beneath the critic's noise, but it's always been there. As you practice these discernment skills, you're not creating something new, but rather clearing away what has obscured your natural wisdom. The journey from criticism to conscience is ultimately a journey home to yourself, to the part of you that has always known your true worth and has always been capable of wise, loving guidance. In our next installment, we'll explore how this wisdom expresses itself through the body and how somatic practices can support your transformation journey. Until then, may you trust the wise voice within you and approach yourself with the same compassion you would offer a beloved friend. This is Dr. Bren for the Genius Circle community. I'll see you in part 6, where we continue building your personalized roadmap for inner critic transformation.